Ladies and gentlemen, we just witnessed a tectonic change in the Middle East. The Israelis were always a force to be reckoned with in that neighborhood. But now they have become the new regional superpower. The events of the past 7 days, plus, of course, the insanely dominant attack by the United States on the top of the Iranian nuclear program, putting the final nail in the coffin, essentially changes the whole rules of the game and basically crowns the Israelis as the new kings of the neighborhood, allowing the United States, the Israelis, and the Saudis to put in motion what they've wanted to do for the past few years. And this absolutely changes entirely the whole layout of the Middle East. A lot to talk about, everything that happened, I'll explain, but mainly I'll give you future scenarios where this thing is headed. And I'm going to break down everything with no agendas, no politics, just the facts. Obviously, things you cannot get from mainstream media in 2025 anymore. So, the US hit Fordo. This was essentially the crown jewel of the Iranian nuclear program. It was built literally into a mountain, like a freaking James Bond movie, like a James Bond villain inside a mountain. Essentially, this was the first use that I know of the bunker busters, whatever they're called. They dropped a few on their head, and it seems that they either damaged it a lot or destroyed it. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, they've hit a heavily fortified nuclear site by the Iranian regime. They've also hit 2 other sites, Natanz and Isfahan, which were already heavily damaged by the Israelis, but they kind of gave one on top of it. Now, the goal of this operation was obviously to destroy the Iranian nuclear program, right? The question is, did they succeed in that plan? Well, the result, TBD. Definitely major damage. They've definitely set the Iranian nuclear program back a few years, but did they 100% destroy it? I'm not sure yet, but it doesn't matter for the sake of our analysis. Even setting back the Iranians a couple years in their nuclear aspirations was good enough what the Israelis, the United States, and the Saudis tried to achieve in this region, and it worked to perfection. Now, allow me to explain. So basically, this whole thing works like this, okay? Why now, okay? So obviously, at some point, if you continue with inaction, which is basically what we've seen from the West, from the United States, from previous administrations, and from the Israelis, to be honest, for the past 20 years, you were about to get a nuclear Iran and the clock ran out. It was either now or never. This was the last opportunity to get it done. Now, this is basically the situation right here, right? So, I want you to pay attention to this, okay? We have seen years, plural, of anti-American operations by the Iranian regime. Multiple US servicemen lost their lives in Iranian operations. Either Iran by their proxies, black ops, sometimes Iran themselves, not even talking about the documented attempt on Donald Trump's life. Go Google it. Iran has caused a lot of death to United States servicemen. Now, I'm not even talking about the fact that Iran, literally, the slogan of Iran is death to America, death to Israel. I'm not sure, maybe it's the other way around. But in any case, they call the United States the great Satan. The Israelis are the little Satan. So there is no love lost between the United States and Iran. Iran has cost a lot of American lives. So Iran have been claiming for a couple of years now that they're basically just trying to build a civilian energy nuclear reactor, right? Which in itself was a ridiculous claim, which everybody knew was absolute bullshit. There's no need for an oil-rich country to pursue nuclear energy. It means insanity. Why would you pursue nuclear energy when you have free oil, right? But then we saw Iran cross the threshold of nuclear energy enrichment, essentially going all the way to 60%, which has 0% civilian use. So once it was clear the mask was taking off, and everybody realized, well, they just crossed this threshold, it's no longer even plausible to assume maybe this is for civilian uses. And then when Trump basically gave them the deadline and said, look, you've got 60 days, 60 days expires, on the 61st day, the Israelis actually carry out the strike, and then the Iranian regime basically takes off the mask. and they say, well, you know what? F you, we're going for nukes. This is a strategic purpose of our government, of our regime, etc., etc. So the Iranian foreign minister basically said, look, we're no longer hiding our intentions to get nukes. And he was talking about potentially acquiring nukes from potential other countries that may provide it, talking to the Russians, to the Pakistanis, whomever. But the whole nuclear thing for civilian purposes is long dead. The United States have suffered a lot from Iran, and at some point you have to act before they get the nukes. But there is a bigger question here, a strategic question of why now? What was the opportunity? And there's an actual answer to this. So the opportunity was very clear, right? Obviously, what happened is that the Israelis basically killed the Iranian proxies. Hezbollah, gone. Whatever's left of it is now a political party trying to survive in Lebanon. Right now, not even a resemblance to what it used to be. The Israelis absolutely dismantled Hezbollah. They've turned it into a basically just a minor player in Lebanon at best, right? Maybe they have aspirations, but they basically took everybody out with the beeper thing, and then they took out Nasrallah. So Hezbollah is gone. Syria, gone. Hamas, they're down to guerrilla warfare in Gaza, strategically irrelevant, gone. Russia and China have indicated that they're abandoning Iran. They basically said, look, we're not dying for you. There's no need. China just wants the oil. They can do business with whomever controls Iran or whatever happens. The Russians have their hands busy in the Ukraine war. You're not that important. We're not helping you. And now the Israelis basically went in, and this was the test of Trump. I think Trump was saying, look, let's play it this way. Let's say we have nothing to do with this. If the Israelis go into Iran and they botch and they shit the bed, we had nothing to do with it. We told the Israelis not to do it. But if they have success, we can say, hey, this was just a misdirection campaign, and we join in and we either claim the win or distance ourselves from the loss. So the Israelis come in and they have stellar success, a generational successful campaign, one that will be studied for decades. A complete red wedding event, taking out all the generals at the same time, all the air defenses. Essentially, they've turned the Iranian airspace into a boardwalk. Literally, the Iranian Secretary of Foreign Affairs had to ask permission from the Israelis to go and fly and meet with the Russians. Literally, he had to ask permission. The Israelis own the Iranian airspace. So at this point, Trump saying, well, the Israelis have done spectacularly well. This is our cue. Now we're going to go and do things the Israelis cannot. There's a limit to what the Israelis can do with their weapons, with their capacity to actually give the final blow to the Iranian nuclear plan and hit Fordo. You had to have B-2s, you have to have the bunker busters, and you have to have the US might to do that. So Iran was isolated, it was weak, it was hurt bad, and essentially it was on the brink of nuclear weapons, which means perfect timing. They're on the brink, they're weak, they're hurt. Let's clean it up, okay? So right now, we can talk briefly about Iran's mistakes, and there are quite a few of them, but I'm going to kind of distill it to about 3 mistakes here. Number one, it's a mistake, it's a hubris mistake, thinking that bluffing means positioning. Strategic positioning and bluffing is not the same thing, and when the bluff here got called by Trump, by the way, kudos to Trump, a lot of people say that Trump is not that great of a negotiator, etc., etc. He called their bluff and he played it to perfection. So the art of the deal, I think he can claim it. The way he played the Iranians in this whole sequence of events, he's definitely the master of the deal, and his critics should shut the fuck up. Now, the other thing that happened is that Iranians over the past 20 years chose a very interesting strategy. Instead of building their own army, their military, their air force, their navy, and building themselves up, they've invested all this money into building a proxy force on the doorstep of the Israelis. So they've invested lots of money in Hezbollah, lots of money in Hamas, lots of money in the Houthi rebels, lots of money in Iraqi militia, etc., 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 etc. And they did bleed the Israelis for years, but not strategically decapitating. The Israelis bled but didn't die, and they've survived to become stronger, while Iran was left broke because of these choices and weak because their own military was trash. They had none. They basically put everything on the proxies. So when the Israelis basically beat the proxies, bleeding but stronger, Iran was basically, we have nothing. We have no jets, we have no air force, we have nothing. So the Israelis came in and basically, it was a pushover. It was nothing. And on top of it, obviously, the most critical mistake where I think the Iranians have absolutely botched it is when the October 7th attacks on Israel happened, which was one of the most horrendous terror attacks in history and one of the greatest crimes of humanity of all time. But when it happened, strategically, of course, speaking, Iranians could have used Hezbollah to combat the Israelis from the north while they're being attacked from the south by Hamas. But they've decided not to do so. The reasoning was that they were afraid from a U.S. retaliation and a U.S. response that might have escalated the whole situation. They were hoping that the Hamas and the Hezbollah on this low capacity will slowly continue to bleed out Israel for the next 20 years. And when they didn't do it, Hezbollah was left out of this. The Israelis basically recovered. And then the first thing they've done is eliminate Hezbollah. And then Syria, and then Hamas, and then the Houthis, etc., etc., etc. So Iran made a few strategic mistakes, and obviously I'm happy they did so, But at the end of the day, we're here at the current state of events, right? So Israel basically is achieving daily strategic success, right? They're taking out nuclear sites, they're taking out military facilities, they're taking out scientists, generals, etc., etc. They are making strategically crippling hits on Iran, right? The United States just had a slam dunk with the B-2s bombing Fordo and Natanz and Isfahan. But Iran literally had, I wouldn't say zero, but almost zero strategic success so far. They really hurt the Israelis. They're hitting civilians. They're hitting apartment complexes. They've killed a lot of people, but nothing was strategically crippling, right? They've hit partially one of the refineries in Israel, but nothing crippling. Within a few days, that thing was up and running again. And that was the only thing. No Air Force bases, no military facilities, no kind of the signs of the government. They haven't hit the parliament or whatever. I mean, what did they really hit? They've hit a bunch of residential buildings. Very painful, strategically irrelevant. So in this current state of events, Iran is essentially losing by 40 points if this is a basketball game. This is over. The game is done. It's garbage time. It's time to let, the ball boy and the equipment manager to play. Now, Iran really has no real military because they've bet on their own thing. And people thought because of the war in Ukraine that the war has changed. It's now all about drones and ballistic missiles. And by the way, Iran spent a lot of resources on policing and harassing their own civilians, which really took a lot of resources from building their own military. They were so busy on building a force internally towards their own civilians. But essentially what they focus on is drones and ballistic missiles, right? Painful, sure. Strategically matched with 5th-gen fighter jets? What the hell were you thinking, in the words of Dr. Phil? What in the world were you thinking? 5th-generation Air Force versus this crap? Completely outmatched. So for everybody who thought that the Ukraine war proves that the new wars will be fought with drones, there's no replacement for a top-tier Air Force and air dominance, okay? What happened in Ukraine is the Russians couldn't achieve air dominance and air superiority, and that's why it got dirty like this. But once the Israelis cleaned house with this, the Iranians stood no chance, okay? So, also shows you a lot about modern warfare when things are going. So, I think what happened here with the Israelis is, I think they tried to avoid going to war here. It was like one of them Bruce Lee or Chuck Norris movies where the hero basically gets punched, gets harassed, he doesn't want to fight. Eventually, at some point, he just fucking snaps, said, fuck it. And then he fucks everybody up, which is literally what happened with the Israelis. They took so much until they snapped, but finally they fucking snapped. And this is what happens. I think they've tried to do deterrence, and the deterrence didn't work because the warning signs doing, hey, dude, don't do it. I'm going to fuck you up. It doesn't work. The dude keeps on coming. And then he gets the ass kicking, which is what happened with the Iranians, okay? We have a complete decapitation, from deterrence to decapitation of the octopus, which is Iran. I think Israel just rebuilt their deterrence. Nobody wants to fuck with them right now. And I think the Saudi Abraham Accords deal is now 100% happening because the whole purpose of that deal was the Saudis to feel like they can depend on the Israelis to protect them. So the Israelis have definitely won big here, okay? Now, The U.S. stance here is very, very simple. Trump doesn't want a war. And that's why he's giving the Iranians an off-ramp. He said, look, folks, we're not interested in a regime change. Relax. We're not interested in replacing you. This is not the sort of op we're running here. We don't want you to have nukes. At this point, we're done. You can close this event right now, right? Close this event right now and survive. We don't want to fuck you up. That's it. Okay? But he's also showing a very big stick, saying, if you don't take this deal and you don't live to fight another day, we're going to fuck you up. Okay? And we will painfully do so. And it's going to be very easy for us to do so. And now Iran has the ball, pretty much. They have to make a decision what they want to do. If they are a rational player, well, they're going to go for the Trump off-ramp. Obviously, there's nothing to be gained. But if they're insane and they'll go the religious route, insanity, then we're talking about a whole different ballgame. If the Iranians are not a rational player, then we're talking about this. Blocking the Hormuz Strait, striking Saudi oil fields, U.S. asset strikes around the Middle East, further strikes on Israel, closing down the Bab al-Mandab with the Houthi rebels, a complete strategy of desperation. Desperation, that's all it is, okay? Either one or all of the above will all be acts of desperation which will lead to the collapse of the regime. All of this ends with the death of the Ayatollah regime. They surely understand that, and they might still do it because they're not a rational player. Let's see. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what they'll choose. Okay? It's not my job to predict. I prepare for all scenarios. That's how I teach, right? Right now, Iran is alone, completely isolated, on their own. Nobody's coming to their help. Russia have their own mess. They're not interested in putting their head against the US. China is completely transactional here. They don't give a fuck about Iran. They just want the oil. They can do a deal with whomever wins. They're going to sit on the sideline, watch who wins, and they'll make a deal with the winner. They don't care. Scenarios. 3 scenarios from this point on, folks. 3 scenarios. Scenario number 1, not in any particular order. Peace through pain. A complete ceasefire. Okay? Basically, everybody says, we made our point, we got our goals, we won. Iran claims victory because it survived. They can say, hey, everybody took a shot at us. The US, the Israelis, we're still here. We won. Oh! US and Israel say, we won. The nukes are gone. We won. Oh! Obviously, if this happens, the Qataris, as much as I hate it, will have to broker this deal because they're the only ones who can. But I don't know how plausible this is. Depends on how rational the Iranians are at this point, which is a huge question, which I don't know the answer to. Scenario number 2, long-term escalation on the back burner. Basically, a lower volume, continue daily ballistic missiles, maybe once a day, 1 missile, once every few days, 1 missile. And then we have the Israeli strikes, not in the same intensity, a lower volume, basically in continuation of this, kind of attrition, right? The Houthi attacks on ships in the Bab al-Mandab continues. Drones on Israel may continue at some capacity, and they will try to do some sort of a closure attempts of the Hormuz Strait, or the Strait of Hormuz, right? Basically, this long escalation, but not full-out war. This is a pretty plausible scenario, but we'll see. Scenario number 3 is basically complete regional chaos, large-scale war. The Iranians basically say, fuck it. They attack US assets, they attack Saudi assets, Hezbollah engages, Iraqi militia engages with the Israelis on their own border, Bab al-Mandab and the Hormuz Straits get closed, and basically Israel gets a barrage of ballistic missiles, it starts to strike back at Iran, the US goes full balls into this war, etc., etc. The whole region goes up in flames, right? Also a possibility. Possibility number 3. I don't know which one of these actually happens. I don't know. Depends on the Iranian regime, 100%. At this point, the Iranians hold the ball. When I say Iranians, I mean the regime, not the people. I love the people. The regime, assholes, right? If they want to drag their country to the depths of hell, they can do that. If they want an off-ramp and everybody goes home, they can do that. Completely 100% dependent on the decision of the Iranian regime. The biggest winners here are Israelis, US and Saudis and Turkey, because they get to keep Syria out of all of this, which is pretty cool, and maybe share it with the Israelis. But the Saudis get the Abraham Accords. The Saudis get Iran removed, which is a huge threat to Saudis. Obviously, US and Israel for obvious reasons. Medium winners. Sorry, losers. Medium losers. Sorry. Medium losers. Russia loses an ally. China loses an ally. whatever. Not a huge ally to lose, but sucks. Not that big of a deal. Biggest loser, Iran, for obvious reasons. And now the counter starts for the end of the Ayatollah regime. Whatever happens, whatever off-ramp, no off-ramp, it's just a question of time. It's no longer when, it's a question, no longer if, but when. Whatever happens from here on, the Iranian regime is done. It may take a day, a week, a month, a year, or a decade, doesn't matter, but the clock has started counting, okay? A quick word to self-promote myself, of course. If you'd like to support this channel and the work I do here, patreon.com/Tom Nash Report. But more important than the Patreon, please share this video so we can get the record straight. So we can spread actual news and analysis about what's going on, not the bullshit of mainstream media. To me, it's way more important this than this, okay? Share the video to help with the Patreon. Share the video, let people know about this, give them a taste of real analysis, real kind of analytic, objective facts, not the mainstream media bullshit. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.